So the goals for today, pretty straightforward. First of all, I want you to help you understand the basics of Matrix, what the software does and how it can help you, and then provide you a framework to get the most out of Matrix with the least amount of work. Doesn't everyone want that? What's 80-20% rule here? 20% of the capabilities inside Matrix, they'll give you 80% of the value. And then thirdly, help you envision what your work and life success would look like with Matrix. So if we're able to achieve these three things, then I think your time will be well spent. One thing I want to bring your attention to is the challenges that I see all the time when I talk to customers. So over the past decade, I've talked to thousands of customers, and these challenges are very, very common and reoccurring. One, team members seem to have trouble understanding what's priority right now. I don't know if this is something that you experience, but if you were to think about your team, the direct team that you work with, do you think everyone understands exactly what you should focus your effort at this moment in order to ensure that you're working on the right thing for your organization, for your department, for yourself? And then the corollary to that is actually it's getting harder and harder to keep track on the status of work across many areas of responsibilities. I don't think we get one task anymore. I don't think we get one project anymore. The reality is, with technology, as we get more deeper and deeper into it, we're just throwing more work at us than ever before. And because of that, we have all these shifting priorities that's constantly changing. And then secondarily, it's changed. The status of the work is changing. And so keeping track of all that is virtually impossible. And there's no one person who's able to keep tab on all of that. And that's where software might come in. And then thirdly, communication from chat messages to emails to meetings, starting to create a very stressful environment for all of us because there's just too much context switching, too many ideas, too many discussions, and you're not even able to spend time on actually executing. So if these are some of the challenges that resonate with you, then I think you're in the right place. So Matrix is a comprehensive email priority and project management software to help teams manage emails, conduct more efficient meetings, and get real-time status updates on critical projects and priorities. So how does Matrix tackle those three problems that I mentioned? First, Matrix uses the 4-quadrant methodology, which I'll go into more details, to help promote very effective prioritization. So you can think of Matrix as a communication tool that will help everyone understand what's priority right now across not just one project, but all your projects. And not only that, help you communicate your priorities to your managers and to your team members. Secondly, Matrix provide many different views, such as the one-on-one view, the agenda view, the timeline view, to help you understand what needs to be done within the right context. One of the things that I like to think about is that when you work on something, you're always working within some sort of context, right? For either on a project or do a task for somebody. And so our goal with Matrix is to surface up whatever it is that's relevant at any point in time. And then thirdly, Matrix provide really deep integrations into software systems you already use, in particular Microsoft Teams and Outlook for effective email and task prioritization. So we know that no matter how much your organization tried to reduce sending emails and all that, you get emails. And emails just create another source of data that's very, very difficult to keep track of. So Matrix provide one central place to make sense out of all of these things. So what makes Matrix different? It's the only project and email and meeting management software that is Microsoft 365 security certified across our web app, Outlook app, and Teams app. The other thing that I'm extremely excited about is we're leveraging AI more and more to help you achieve your goals. And I hope to show you that today in order to get you excited about what Matrix can do for you literally after this call. And then thirdly, we provide what's called people-centric collaboration. So the reality is it's not just about projects, right? When you're working on a project, you're working on a project with a teammate, with a colleague, with your manager, or for a client. And so then when you really think about it, it doesn't really matter what task a project belongs in, as long as it's the prioritized task within the context of whoever it is that you're working for. So people-centric collaboration, I think, makes so much more sense in today's environment. And then lastly, Matrix is available as a SaaS, which is what I'll be showing you, a standard software application, as well as a HIPAA compliant for healthcare life sciences, an Azure government cloud solution for state and local governments, and then a managed private Azure deployments for enterprise customers. If any of these other solutions interest you, please feel free to reach out to me. My email earlier, hi@affluence.com or support@affluence.com, and we'd be happy to help you understand that. So let's talk about the basics, fundamental theory behind Priority Matrix. So there's a famous quote attributed to former President Eisenhower: "What is important is seldom urgent, and what is urgent is seldom important." And when you think about it, it makes sense. What happens is, let me give you an example. This morning when you woke up, literally think about this morning when you woke up, what was the first thing that you did, right? Well, you might be checking your emails. And then if you're at work, guess what? You probably got dozens of emails that's coming in, and they're all requiring your attention. There's an email about subject A, an email about subject B, and the reality is the vast majority of them aren't that important. And at least this applies to me. I get hundreds of emails on a daily basis. I don't need to look at all of them, but I don't know which one to look at. And so therefore it's becomes an urgent thing. I got to look through all of them to see what is actually truly important in all of this. And so on a daily basis, we have all these different tasks that's coming up and pulling us in all these different directions. And the vast majority of them aren't really there to help us fulfill our goals, but they're there yanking on our attention, pulling us away from what's truly important. So one exercise I like to ask you to do and other customers to do is literally take out a piece of paper right now, put that piece of paper in front of you, and start writing down everything you have to do, right? And that might be 5 items, that might be 20 items. And here's a question I have for you. Once you've written that list down and you have to decide what to work on, what do? Do you choose the item that was written at the top, or do you choose the item that's written at the bottom or somewhere random in the middle? And, is it a statistical game where, you're choosing one task out of 20 and hope for the best that it's the right one to work on? And if you think from that perspective, then you need a framework to think about how you should decide what to work on at any point in time. And that's what Priority Matrix is all about. So instead of just having in one list, the way you can think about it is look at the dimensions of importance and urgency. Every single task, is it important? And when do I have to get it done? Do I have to get it done today? Do I have to get it done this week? Or is it something that can be delayed for a month or two? And that's how you can think about all the dimensions of everything that you have to do. And if it has to be done real soon and it's important, then it belongs in the do now category, which is the bucket 1, right? Quadrant 1. And then the things that you should plan for are the things that are important, but not yet urgent. And that goes in quadrant 2. And here's the really interesting thing. Eventually, items in quadrant 2 move to quadrant 1, right? Eventually. What happens though is that if you're constantly working on quadrant 1 and you're only working on quadrant 1, that means you're firefighting. That means you haven't planned really for the things that are coming up. And so this was really fascinating because I met a customer at a trade show, and he came up and said, "Yay, I know that you guys are trying to get people to organize all these tasks and so forth in quadrant 1, quadrant 2, but what happens is if I'm only spending my time in quadrant 1, then I'm constantly firefighting and I'm not actually getting anything done." And so it was such a fascinating realization for me. And so I want to share that with you too. And so when you think about Priority Matrix, take all these tasks, like let's just call those 20 things that you have to do. When you put it into these different quadrants, just think about how well planned this is all coming together, right? So again, if everything's important and urgent, then nothing is. So you cannot have all 20 things in quadrant 1. That means you're firefighting. That means everything has gone kaput. So instead, you should have no more than a quarter of the things in quadrant 1, no more than a quarter of things in quadrant 2. And then what's the delegate? Delegate, you can think of delegate as outsourcing this task to somebody else. Now, it could be something like delegating to your executive assistant or delegating to a teammate. And the idea is of delegation is there somebody else that can execute on this better than me? Or is there somebody else where they can actually get this done? But it's not going to pull me away from my important critical task. So that's where specialization comes in, and that's what coworkers and teammates are all about. And then finally, the inbox is sort of the catch-all for everything else. So that 20 items that you had initially would have gone into the inbox. And then from there, you put it into the appropriate quadrants. It's a very, very powerful exercise. It is an extremely hard exercise. If you're having a hard time, you're not the only one. Everyone struggled with this. This is the hardest part. And this is the most interesting thing about Matrix. In some sense, if you listen to this webinar and you never use our software, but you follow this exercise in terms of your thinking, I think you'd come out capturing some value because you're starting to create some clarity. But here's the most fascinating thing about this particular exercise after you do this. Now that you have your action item in this quadrant, walk around the office and start comparing notes. And this is where the magic happens. You go to your manager and say, hey, by the way, these are the tasks that I have for all the projects that I'm assigned to. What do you think? Do you agree on all the priorities, all the stuff I have in quadrant 1, all the stuff I have in quadrant 2? And then these are the things that I'm putting off. And then these are things that have not been prioritized yet, right? And then your manager can look at that and say, oh, wait a minute, I think this should be higher priority, or this should be lower priority, or we should work on this first. And so you can see magically, Matrix provided you a communication tool for you to actually clearly communicate to everybody else within your organization what the priorities are. At least that was in your head. Otherwise, no one would be able to know what you think about the priorities. And then the corollary to that is your coworkers can do the exact same exercise, and then your manager can do the exact same exercise. And so when you do this note comparison, it is extremely powerful. So one thing I've seen customers do, which is really impactful, is have Matrix as a project and then project that on the big screen while you're doing your meeting. And so instead of going to the meeting and start talking about all these things that you might be doing, or what's on the back burner, et cetera, you project this on the screen, and now everyone looks at it, and you are going to have disagreements. But after the meeting ends, you understand where the disagreements are, and you can actually decide on what are the things that's important. So then the Eisenhower Matrix creates the alignment because it forces you to prioritize from the beginning. And again, that's the hardest part. If you're struggling with it, you're not the only one, and that's the point. Second, success from Matrix isn't about necessarily finding what everyone agrees on. As I mentioned, if you agree with your manager and all your coworkers, and you know exactly what to work on, you might not need our software at all. You can just go and execute. Every single day, you're fine. But I almost guarantee that the vast majority of individuals, myself included, don't always have alignment. And so having a communication tool like Matrix is so helpful, and discovering that disagreement is where it's all about. And so that's the most impactful part of using Matrix as a software. One thing I want to mention is that the recording, as this webinar, since it's recorded, will be available at affluence.com/webinars. And then if you have any questions at all, or feedback, or thoughts about this webinar in particular, please feel free to reach out to us. We always appreciate feedback. And with that, I'm going to go ahead and jump into the Matrix software demo itself. All right. So here, you should see my Matrix, and in this particular case, I have Matrix open on the web app. So you see how inside Matrix on the web app, I have on my left my list of projects. These are all the various areas of responsibilities that I have. And then in the middle, I have the quadrants. And so you see the structure is very similar to what I had before: the do now, the do later, the delegate, and the inbox. And so when I want to create a task in Matrix, I can decide where it goes. Now, as I mentioned, the inbox is sort of your catch-all, right? So here, let's just say I want to go and identify a new marketing channel. Okay, so assuming I have a task, identify a new marketing channel. And one thing that works well with Matrix is that it uses what's called natural language to try to understand due dates, etc. So I'm going to say due in 2 weeks. So now that's how I create a task. And when I do that, on the right-hand side, something called the item details opens. And so now you see I have a task that I've just created here, and identify a new marketing channel due in 2 weeks. And because I said due in 2 weeks, our system automatically interprets that and sets the due date for me. So now it's on my calendar. I have a notification for it. So then I'm actually able to go back and get reminded to execute on this Now, if we look at this a little bit further, I can decide which quadrant it belongs in, right? So maybe this is an extremely critical task that I want to work on. So I can just drag and drop, and that's how I reprioritize. Again, don't forget that Matrix is a communication tool. So what I've just done is I've just communicated to everyone who's in this project that this is a quadrant 1 action item. So this is high priority, and this is something that all of us need to look at, right? It's very, very clear. And so when I project this on the screen, or I'm in a meeting and we're talking through this, there is no miscommunication as to whether or not I agree and whether my teammates agree. Now, again, the disagreements are fine. Totally have discussions on the disagreement. But then at the end of the day, when you walk out of that meeting, Matrix is your master plan, and everyone has bought into that. So that's the goal. So now I have that task selected. On the right-hand side, as I mentioned to you, the item details, it tells me what project it belongs in. Then let's just say that this task is really important. What I want to do is I go ahead and add a star to it. What I've just done is I've communicated to Matrix that this is a very important task. As I look down a little bit further, there's a section called owner. So owner is the person who is responsible for this. If I click on owner, I can assign to somebody. Now, one thing that's really interesting is Matrix can only have one owner at a time. And customers have asked, hey, can I have multiple owners? And the answer is always no. If you have multiple owners, there's no clarity on who's responsible for it. And so Matrix only lets you have at the most one owner, and that owner is the avatar that shows here. Now, everyone else, there might be multiple people that's involved within any particular action item, and so they are called followers. So the reason why you might want to follow a task is if it gets updated, then you want to get notification. If there's a reminder or a due date, then you might want to get notification. So if you're a manager and you assign a task to a colleague, to your direct report, and you want to know when that direct report has finished that task or whether there's an update to it, then you want to be a follower. And so you can see how I created this task. When I assign to somebody, I'm automatically added as a follower. And then after that, you have progress, which is 0 to 100%, whether or not something is done. If 100%, that means it's done. Maybe it's 30% done, 40% done. Effort, how much time it actually takes. There's a difference between something that's due in one day, but it takes half a day to get done. And then you have due date, right? So for example, I said due in 2 weeks. And then there's a difference with reminder as well. So reminder is extremely powerful. So let me give you an example. So let's just say I have, identify a new marketing channel due in 2 weeks. But then if I wait for September 5th to come around, I'm not going to get that done because, I cannot get that done on that day. So what I might want to do is I want to set a reminder, remind me on a daily basis to actually work on it. So then I can go and say, remind me daily. So what I've just done is now I've told Matrix, I have a task that's in quadrant 1, that's starred, that's due in 2 weeks, and remind me daily to work on this. Matrix then knows that this is something that you've got to work on, and you're gonna get notifications, and now it ensures that everyone is on board. But here's the thing too, which is I've assigned it to a teammate. So then that teammate will also get that notification. And so if you think about your organization, if you're thinking about all the tasks that you have to do, again, we have way more things to do than the resources to do them, right? And so if you go and you just create a task and you don't assign it and you don't set due dates, then you're not going to ensure that the resources are actually in place. How many times has it been in the past week? Just think about your work where, somebody has an idea, somebody's working on something, but then afterwards, they never got it done because it was never on their agenda. It was never on their calendar, and they were never reminded about it, right? You'll have a meeting and you come up with these brilliant ideas, absolutely brilliant ideas. And then 2 weeks later, you have a recap. It's like, oh, I forgot to write it down. So Matrix allowed you to have one central place to capture all that task, capture the due dates, capture the reminders, and not only that, ensuring that everyone is aligned in terms of priority. So that's reminders and that's due dates. I myself personally, when I use Matrix, I always set both. I always set due dates for all my tasks. I always set reminders. It is extremely helpful. And then you scroll down a little bit more, there's a chat section. The chat section is communication within context. Let me give you an example. Let's just say you have something you identify a new marketing channel due in 2 weeks, as I have a task here. Now, guess what? Eugenia might follow up and say, hey, hi, what is it that you wanted me to do? Can you explain more? Or hey, what do you think of this, XYZ? Imagine if all this communication was by email. or some of it was by email, some of it is in a meeting, some of it is in Microsoft Teams as you're sending messages back and forth. What happens is that you have all this communication, but then there's no context because you have so many different sources of communication and you're sending messages back and forth. And then in 2 weeks, when you're reviewing this, it's very difficult for us to remember everything that we talked about. So Matrix allowed you to have a chat, a conversation about this task directly here inside every single item. Here's the beauty of it, which is if you have a task that's just, a few days worth of work, that's not a big deal. But what if you have a task that's actually months worth of work and involves 5, 10 different people? And then not only that, you have changing priorities, changing due dates, and so forth. It is virtually impossible for everyone to be engaged in every single conversation around this task. So what Matrix allows you to do is provide you a full history of everything that matters about that task, about that context. So now I have a task that's a new marketing channel due in 2 weeks, but everyone's talking about it. A new team member can come in here, they can go back, scroll back in history and see all the conversation and see all the changes and priorities, and they know exactly what was talked about and why. And so someone who's new to the software or new to the organization can get caught up extremely quickly. The other thing that's helpful about this chat is it provides history when someone has left the organization as well. So imagine if someone is no longer part of the team or they move on to a different project and they've made a lot of changes, they've came up with many very, very helpful ideas, and then they leave. And if it was all in their head or it's all in their email, it's really, really difficult for you to find the context. So Matrix allows you to have all that information here in one central place. 2 years, 3 years down the road, you still have all that context and you're still able to look back and actually understand what was talked about and what the priorities are. I know I'm talking a lot about that capability, but it is so useful when you actually need it. So keep that in mind as you use the chat section. And as you can see, I was able to type remind me daily here, and a text turned green. That means our system understands that, is able to actually set a reminder for me. I can do other commands such as assign it to people or update the icons, etc. And then you have the note section. The note section is just additional details about the task. It is not intended to be a rich text, notes. If you want rich text, use Microsoft Words, use Google Docs or whatever it is, and then you can link that into Matrix. But this section here is just for you to add some text about this task if you want to have capture some notes, and then you can create subtasks, right? I can do subtask 1, subtask 2, subtask 3, and if I get 1 out of 3 subtasks done, then progress is 33%. So our system captures that and tracks that for you. So every time you create a subtask, that information is also created as part of the history. And then finally, you have the resources section where you can add files, links, and URLs, etc. So for example, if you use SharePoint at your organization and then you have a document that you want to link to this, well, guess what? You can actually just go ahead and capture that SharePoint link and paste it here as a URL. And not only that, you can actually link Matrix action items all together as well, because maybe you have multiple items that are all relevant to each other. So that's the resource section. It's actually very powerful. I'm not going to go too much details into it, but this is where you can go and you can create dependencies and then build Gantt charts directly all from here in the resource section. So that's the item details. Now let's go back to the big picture, which is when we talk about, Matrix, again, you have a project, you have the 4 quadrants, and then you have the item details for each of those. Again, if you were using Matrix and you did this for each of your key initiative, everyone, it could be aligned and be able to see one-on-one with respect to priority. So now let me show you how to create a project. So I go to a project, and let's just say I go choose new project here. This is your project creation page. I have the option of what I called a blank project. What is a blank project? Well, you can choose the methodology. For example, I'll just click on it so you can see. Here I can change the name of the project. I can say user group. You can think of this as departments or various team members. Let's say you're a sales team and you have, a customer success person, an engineering person on it, and you have a user group for that, right? So then when you create a new project to onboard a customer, you can just associate to that user group, and then everyone who's relevant will automatically be invited. And then you have the basic various types of template that's available. A basic Matrix, which is that do now, do later, or some of these other options. And so I'll let you explore that. But the other thing I want to show you is actually a couple of other things that we've done, which is over the years, we've created a lot of public templates. And what public templates are best practices. So, 30, 60, 90-day plan for managers. I like this template just because everybody on a quarterly basis, you're planning out all the things you have to do. Especially if you're a new manager, you want to know what are the things I should do in order to maximize my success. And so we create a template for that. So now if you're a new manager or you're new to a role, you can actually create a project from that template instead. So you can think of these as various best practices. And then what happens is you can actually save templates within your own organizations as well. And I'll show you how to do that. But for example, let's say if you were a property management company, within that property management company, whenever you bring on a new property, you might have 30 or 60 action items that you have to do. Everything from permitting to finding contractors, subcontractors, etc. Right? So with Party Matrix, once you create the Party Matrix with all those tasks in place, you can save it as a template. And now when you want to launch a new Party Matrix, instead of creating everything from scratch all over again, you never have to. You just launch it from one of the existing template that's saved for your organization. And now all those action items are created for you. All the due dates are created. And so my templates here, this section here, essentially is a place for you to store internal company knowledge on various processes and so forth. And so you can think of it as the use cases are extremely broad. Onboarding new customers, perhaps doing contract negotiations with the customer, or ensuring that the customer succeeds, or again property management, or all the tasks you have to do as a consultant for an external client. And then thirdly, you have the option that we call Create with AI, which is a new capability that we have. And the way it works is the following: tell us your goal, and we'll give you suggestions on how to achieve that. So earlier, you saw that I created a task called identify new marketing channels. So I'm going to go ahead and say how to identify new marketing channels. Okay. And so I literally would type this goal into Party Matrix and I press proceed. And now you see our system says your project is being created. You can move on and we'll let you know when it's ready. That's fantastic. So I'm going to go ahead and move on. So I'm going to press close here. And I'm going to go back to my Party Matrix. And you see, when I go back to this list here, I see all the projects that I have. And with all my projects, all the projects that are starred actually pop to the top. So let me go to that team priorities project here. When I open this, I can click on this little eye icon here, and I open what's called the project details. Now, we talked about item details. Project details is essentially at a higher level, which includes the name of the project, whether or not this project is starred. Again, starred project pops to the top, the user group, and then who's inside this project. So the way project permission works in Party Matrix is following. When you create a project, maybe for yourself, then only you can see the task. But you can go and you can actually invite team members to the project itself. When you do invite team members, then they see everything in the project itself. So they have full permissions in order to reprioritize and change tasks or add new tasks and so forth. And so when you add somebody to a project, just keep in mind that it gives them full access to everything there. And the way I like to set things up is always make sure that the appropriate team members are added to every single project. And so I like to create a bunch of different projects that serves different goals. And then from there, make sure that you actually, again, invite the appropriate people. And so everyone's on the same page. And then when you have your meetings and so forth, project the appropriate matrix onto the screen. And then down here, you have the quadrant names, and every quadrant name is customizable. So instead of do now, for example, I can actually change this to fires, okay? And then I'm going to choose, let's say if I want to change the color, I can actually change the color of the matrix itself. And what I've just done here is I've just customized the matrix to my own liking. And so within your organization, you might want to use different color coding, right? So for example, maybe certain type of project might have the color, the theme red, and then others might be green, might be blue. So then you can think of marketing, engineering, etc. So then on the left-hand side here, it's very easy to see what the projects are. And so then you can customize all that. And then earlier I mentioned how you can actually save this as a template. So let's just imagine if I've just gone and updated this entire matrix, customize it to my liking, customize the quadrant name, added some tasks that I want to be repeated. I can go to this ellipsis up here and choose save project as template. And once I save that as a template, others within my organization can leverage that template. They've just saved a ton of time because they don't have to rebuild the matrix over and over again. Once you use Priority Matrix more, definitely leverage this as a best practice because it will actually save you a lot of effort. Okay, so now with that, I'm going to go and look at this new project that's been created from the AI system. You see how earlier in the goal, I type exploring, or I type whatever, help me identify new marketing opportunities. So Priority Matrix went and built this project for me. So this was built in real time while we were speaking. And then now that it's created, it says recently modified. So I knew that it was there. So when I open this Priority Matrix, here's a couple of things for you to see. You see in the item details, in the project details rather, it actually says this project aims to help you identify new marketing channels that could use that Priority Matrix would help you with. And then this is actually all the different various tasks that Priority Matrix just came up for you in order for you to achieve this goal. So these are actually organized using a different quadrant naming terminology: low effort, high impact, high effort, high impact, low effort, low impact, and high effort, low impact. So if you look at this, it should be very obvious that quadrant 1 is where you get the biggest bang for the buck, right? So what happens is these are the things that maybe you don't have to spend too much effort, but you can actually create various somewhat high impact in the overall scope of things. Now, one thing I want to let you know is that this is not a way for Priority Matrix to tell you everything you should do. What it's doing is we're leveraging AI to make it easier for you to get a baseline on, so then you can get started much more quickly. So if you were a salesperson and you're looking for new ideas on how to, prospect better, or if you were a manufacturing company and you're looking for a better way to streamline your supply chain, those are the type of goals that you can put in. Now, Priority Matrix also leverage your job function, and then the more details you can give it, the more specific the information come out. But this is something that we're very excited about because the idea here is not to go and replace all the action items that you have to create for yourself. But if you're a new manager or you're changing roles or you're trying to improve yourself, see what our system can do to actually help you achieve those goals. And so these will have due dates on them, and Priority Matrix will send you notifications to ensure that you actually look at them and tackle them. So let me summarize so far what you've seen. You've seen how to create projects. You've seen how to customize projects. You've seen how within a project itself, you have the 4 quadrants. And then within the 4 quadrants, you have the various action items with all the details associated with it. If I were to tell you the 80-20 rule here, which is the 20% of capabilities inside Priority Matrix, that'll give you 80% of the impact. That's it, right? When you create Priority Matrix, make sure you put in a goal, have a project for each of the key things that you're working on. Definitely make sure that you create tasks with due dates on them and set reminders. And if you do that and you've invited the appropriate team members, you've already achieved the vast majority of all of those benefits that we talked about in the presentation, because your team members will be aligned. They can look at this project and they know exactly what everyone's working on. You can have really powerful discussions on what should be priorities, what should not be priority, and that's how you can actually get value today. So after this webinar is done, try that. Go into the Priority Matrix app, try to create some projects, try to create some goals, and then from there start working on them and see whether or not it actually moves the needle towards your own productivity. And the whole goal of Priority Matrix is to actually get all these things that's inside your head. I know this is a feeling I have all the time, which is there's so many ideas, so many things you can do, and if it's you just letting it brew in your head, it's just a very, very stressful environment to be in. So instead, when you're writing things down into Priority Matrix, you know exactly where it belongs. You can start looking at it within the bigger picture and see how to. I'm going to show you the next level of Priority Matrix, which is actually understanding how to tie everything together. The first is email. As I mentioned, we're getting emails all the time. And so one of the challenges that I face in particular, which is, with hundreds of emails, and there's some emails I need to answer, I can flag them. I'm sure you do this already. You can flag them, and that works great if you have 5 flagged emails. But then what happens when you have dozens of flag emails, right? Then what do you work on? Because now, again, everything's important, everything is urgent. And then not only that, the flag email is great if you can get back to it within a day, but in 3 weeks, you're going to forget all those flag emails as well. So if you go to your Outlook, what happens is you can go to the App Store, and in the App Store, you can install Matrix for Outlook. When you install this option to open Matrix and prioritize any email. So you see, I have an example email here. I'm going to click on prioritize email. Matrix for Outlook opens up. And from here, you can see that it actually captures the subject of the email as an item name. I can choose what project it belongs in, right? So for example, here, I am going to just choose my team priorities here. I can choose what quadrant it belongs in. I can assign this email to a teammate. Use case, pretty straightforward. Again, let's say you're in sales and you go and you want to invite maybe a customer send you an email that says, hey, I'm having so-and-so problem, right? And now you want to go and you want to ensure that engineering or customer success is looking at that email. If you forward the email, yes, that may work, but the problem is then you don't know whether or not they're getting it done. And then not only that, you're not able to set a due date on that forwarded email. Now you're just getting everyone involved and just cluttering everyone's inbox instead. So what happens with Matrix is you can capture that email, create the task, choose the appropriate quadrants, assign it to the person, set a due date, and press capture. So what I've just done is you see how now on the right-hand side here, it opens exactly the same item details that you saw earlier within Matrix web app. And so within here, I have the project it belongs in, the quadrant name, the owner, and all the history of all the changes here. And this is where it's really helpful because you now have a task that's related to this email. And then not only that, you have all the context of all the conversations around here, because now your customer success person can chime in, your engineer can chime in, and you can talk to each other about all these different action items, and you have all of this captured within the chat section. And then the email itself is uploaded into Matrix and as an email file, and someone else can actually open that email and look at it and respond to it. And if I go back to Matrix here, you'll see that email was actually created right here into that quadrant 1 as I did from the beginning. The other thing you can do with Matrix that's also unique to our add-in for Outlook is the ability to attach Matrix an email to an existing task. So let's say I have an email, but again from a customer, but I already have a task that's open for the customer. So if I were to go and create another task, then maybe I'm going to start losing track of it. So instead, I can go open Matrix here and then go open the panel. And instead of actually just capturing as a new task, what I can do is I can click on this Matrix search bar. I can search for the appropriate task, and then I can hover over that task and attach the email to an existing task. This, again, is very, very useful for communicating, capturing external communication and making sure that it's all prioritized. So now you can attach multiple emails to one task, or you might have, even additional documents or PDFs, etc. And then you have one central place that's tracking the progress of all of these. So that's how our email integration works. It is very, very helpful to prioritize email. This is something, again, that I personally use all the time. And a lot of our customers look at the email prioritization as the #1 reason for using Matrix because everyone is overwhelmed with it. The other thing I want to show you is our Microsoft Teams integrations. So if you use Microsoft Teams, I highly recommend that you do this. Go ahead and install Matrix here from the App Store, and then afterwards, make sure that you right-click here and pin Matrix. Once you pin Matrix, you're able to use Matrix directly inside the Teams app without having to go back to the web app. And the reason I like this is because of context switching. Now, I know that all of us just have too many tabs, too many software applications open at any point in time. And so when you use Matrix inside Teams, you don't even have to leave Teams to open Matrix. You see how it just shows up here? And when I click on this, I see the exact same view as that web app. I have my list of projects on the left side here. I have the quadrants in the middle, and then I have the item details. But you see, when I open Matrix for Teams, I'm in what's initially called the home view. The home view has alert section, which essentially tells me what action items do I need to look at any point in time. So for example, earlier I said due dates and reminders, right? So when the items come due or when there's a reminder in place, the alert section kicks in and it tells me, hey, hi, you need to take a look at this. Or if my coworkers assigns me a task, or if a task that I follow or that I assigned to somebody got updated, all that gets alerted here into the alert section. So you can think of the alert section as all the stuff that requires your attention. As you click through it, you can see what the changes are. And then once in a while, you can click on here to clear all the notifications and you go back to a blank slate. So you can think of the home section as where you start your day, right? In the morning, what I do is I start my day at the home section here to see all the changes that are relevant to me, go through them, ensure that everything that's actually is critical is addressed. And then from there, I can clear my notifications so I have a blank slate. You can also get to the home view from the top here. If you click on this, it takes you back to this view, and then as well as all the projects that I've recently worked on. Now, there's a couple things inside Teams that makes Prioritization unique. So Prioritization is probably the most integrated solutions inside Microsoft Teams. So when I go to a chat section, and let's just say I have a coworker that I work with. Again, this might be, a teammate that works with you on all your critical projects and so forth. You can go to this plus section here, this plus here, and add a Priority Matrix tab. So when you add a Priority Matrix tab, you have two choices. First, you can embed a Priority Matrix project inside a chat with somebody. Really helpful if you and a coworker are working on a project and you want to always know, all the changes, all the priorities within that project. The second option is for you to see the one-on-one. So the way the one-on-one works is the following. When you add a one-on-one view, one-on-one tab to a coworker, you can see everything you have in common with that coworker. So I already have this added, so let me show you how it works. So you see here, I have the one-on-one tab in place. I selected Eugenia from here in the chat with her. Now I can see all the tasks I have in common with her across all my projects. So what we've just done is we've flipped everything that's in Priority Matrix around, and instead of looking from a project-centric point of view, we're looking at it from a people-centric point of view. You're not looking at projects and quadrants and then people. Instead, you're looking at people and show you all the action items you have across all these different projects and all the different areas of responsibilities. If you're working on a lot of different projects with a lot of different people and you're assigned a lot of different things, this view is extremely helpful because you can see everything from here. And then not only that, you can actually add tasks directly from this view. So when you have that one-on-one meeting with your manager or that one-on-one meeting with your direct reports, you can actually create tasks and create action items directly from here. So you don't have to open Priority Matrix. And this takes away that excuse that says, oh, I forgot to write that down, right? When you have that meeting, use the add share task option to create tasks in real time as you're talking to each other. And then, as I mentioned, you have the other option, which is you can see a whole Priority Matrix project inside the tab as well. So you can see here that I can add this to a Microsoft Teams channel as well, right? So for example, maybe you have a Priority Matrix for every team channel that you work on, especially if it's covering a special initiative or if it's covering a customer, etc. So then from here, everyone can see what the priorities are for each of those projects. The other thing that Priority Matrix does is it allows you to take any conversation that you have in Teams and convert into a task. So imagine if your direct report sends you an email that says, hey, hi, could you do XYZ? I can just hover over the Teams here, click on this ellipsis, and create PM item. And so you see what I'm doing is actually I can convert any chat into a task. I can choose what project it belongs in, what quadrant it belongs in, and it creates the task, and I can set due dates, etc. I don't even have to go to Priority Matrix, find a project, add the task, and try to remember, hey, what is it that my manager asked me to do, or what is it my teammate asked me to do. So from here, I can create this task. And here's another powerful thing about Priority Matrix, which is we actually link back to that moment in time where you had that conversation. The use case for this is the following. Let's say you and a coworker are talking about some, 5 or 6 different action items. You just brainstorm a bunch of different tasks, and then from there you create a lot of different tasks inside Priority Matrix. And then suddenly, 6 months later, you're thinking, hey, by the way, what were we talking about? What was the context around all of this? What triggered this conversation and triggered all these tasks, right? Because remember, you just had this whole conversation inside Teams, and here you are looking at your Party Matrix action item instead. So Party Matrix link back to that moment in time when you had that conversation. So you can click on this and it jumps back into Teams and show you the context of your discussion. Very, very helpful, especially, again, if you're using Party Matrix to prioritize all these tasks that you have and all these communication that you have inside Teams and Outlook. The other thing you're able to do too is actually open Party Matrix and send a Party Matrix task directly here inside Teams. So you can see how I'm able to actually attach these action cards and share with teammates. So let's go back to Party Matrix here. And let's recap everything that we've talked about, because this is the scope of the capabilities that I want to show you. There's a lot more features that's available, including integrations with meetings and so forth, but that is optional. And when I say it's optional, it means that, if you want to just leverage some of the capabilities in Party Matrix to get most of the value, everything that I've covered here today is sufficient, right? Again, you create projects here. Inside the Teams app, you click on this top view to create project. And then from those projects, make sure you put in the appropriate goals, leverage your AI capabilities if applicable, and then create those various projects. And then from there, within the quadrants themselves, make sure that you customize the quadrant name so that it reflects how you think or how your organization wants to use Party Matrix. And then when you create action items, make sure that you set the due dates. So I'm going to go ahead and jump back to my presentation here. Okay, so now it's on you, right? And so Party Matrix itself is just a software. We all know that. And if it's too hard for you to create those action items, it's too hard for you to prioritize, it's too hard for you to go and invite team members and so forth, there's nothing Party Matrix can possibly do that will help you become more productive. But on the other hand, if you're able to go and start capturing your priorities on a personal level, your team priorities, and then create Party Matrix projects for your goals, and then making sure that you invite the appropriate team members and pitch to them why it's important to focus on high impact tasks, and then you're actually setting due dates on those tasks, and you're actually getting them done, then Party Matrix can be extremely helpful. Again, Party Matrix is a communication tool. And so when I say communication tool, it's just a way for you to show others what you think are priorities and a way for others to show you what they think are priorities. It is not a list. It is so different from a list. If you're using a list to manage your task and project right now and you're struggling, that is exactly why you're struggling, which is it is not helpful, not conducive to communicating to others what should be worked on at any point in time. Don't forget that if you have disagreements with teammates on priorities, that means you're using Party Matrix correctly. So I can't emphasize it enough. And that's the most exciting part, which is identifying, one, the things everyone should be working on, and then two, identifying the things that no one should be working on. So if we're able to help you eliminate a couple of projects, then we've saved you thousands, if not millions of dollars. And then the other thing that you can use Party Matrix for as well is to communicate to your manager your workload. Okay, so when you look at quadrant 1, if you have so many tasks in there and you're getting more and more, you have to tell your manager, hey, by the way, I'm overloaded. I can't get any more done. What should I drop? Because if you have more than a quarter of the task inside quadrant 1, that's far too much. You have to deprioritize other things, otherwise you will not get things done. So use Party Matrix as a way to justify and get clarity on what it is that you should work on today. And vice versa too. When you're assigning a task to a teammate and to a coworker and they are completely overloaded, look at their priority list. Make sure that they are also understanding if they can only focus on a few things at a time, these are the things they should focus on. Some advice: use Party Matrix to track high impact tasks. You might not want to use Party Matrix to capture everything, right? There's just some things that are actually far too easy just to get it done as opposed to capturing it. But as you use Party Matrix more, then you can use Party Matrix to capture everything. But if you're in the very early stages of Party Matrix and you're using this with just your key stakeholders, use it to track high impact tasks. Use it as a communication tool. That's the key. It's a communication tool. And make sure that you show others your Party Matrix so then you have that alignment. And then finally, use Party Matrix to manage your individual goals, because that's the easy fruit for you to pick, which is using our goal system and just put in some of the things that is actually impactful to you today and see what our system suggests. It's a baseline. So what should success look like if you leverage Party Matrix well? First, you have one central place to track priorities. And then two, everyone in the team understands and are aligned on key tasks. And then those repetitive procedures are templatized. Almost every single industry has procedures, standard operating procedures or tasks that are happening over and over again, and you're just changing due dates and all that. Use Party Matrix to create those templates. And then finally, make sure that you prioritize your emails. That's one of those areas where a lot of people struggle with. And, I'm like you, I get a lot of emails, and vast majority of the time, most of those emails would get lost if I don't prioritize them. So make sure you use that capability, because I think that's extremely helpful. And that concludes my presentation. If you have any questions right now, please feel free to send in the chat and I'll take a look and see if I can answer. Thank you. Okay, so I have a question around, does Party Matrix integrate with case notes in Salesforce? Unfortunately, we do not, but Party Matrix has an API. And so essentially, if you're looking at the enterprise version of Party Matrix, you can go and actually you can leverage Party Matrix to integrate with any of the other systems. The systems we integrate out of the box include a lot of the stuff in the Microsoft side. So Microsoft Planner, Microsoft Azure DevOps, Graph, To-Do, Outlook, Tasks, etc. So that's where our out-of-the-box integrations are. And then the other thing we have is also Power Automate. So with Power Automate, you can actually have a lot of integrations that are called if this, then that kind of scenario. So then you could theoretically set up Party Matrix as a Power Automate integrations with anything else that integrates with Power Automate, which is a lot. So that's something to consider. I think that requires, a certain level of Microsoft licensing. So Phil, if that's something that you're interested in on the enterprise side, just reach out to us and we'd be happy to take a look.